There was an old man who lived alone in the middle of the forest. He had 3 loyal hunting dogs to keep him company on the long, lonely nights. Nobody knew his real name, but most folks just called him Smitty. He loved hunting, fishing, and the great outdoors. Years ago, Smitty had quit his job, packed his belongings, and moved out to a nice little cabin he had built himself way back in the woods. It wasn't very big, but it was just enough for him. The cabin only had 2 rooms. One he used for a bedroom, and the other was a kitchen. He had built himself a nice big open fireplace where he could cook his food and warm his body on the chilly winter nights. He had planted himself a nice little vegetable garden by the side of the house, and he would go out every day and hunt rabbits and fish. During the warm months, Smitty had no problem catching as much small game as he needed. But in the colder months, it became a little more difficult to keep his stomach full. One cold winter night, the old man went out to his storage shed to see what he could find for dinner. All he found was a small piece of fatty meat and a handful of moldy potatoes. He had to do with what he could, so he cooked it up and gobbled it down. Smitty was still a little bit hungry, but there wasn't much he could do about it. So despite the protest of his grumbling stomach, Smitty stroked the fire in the fireplace to keep his cabin warm, and he went to bed. He was just about to fall asleep when he heard something in his room. He opened his eyes and saw a shadow creeping across the wall. He slipped quietly out of bed and tiptoed into the other room. There, he saw the oddest looking creature he had ever seen. It was short and stubby, with pointed ears, and short fat feet with long claws, and it had a long bushy tail. There was no open doors or windows, so Smitty was confused on how the odd-looking creature had gotten in. He quietly picked up his axe, creeping over to the odd-looking creature, and brought it down squarely on its big tail. The creature let out a loud screech and escaped through the big hole in the wall. The old man was left standing there with a long bushy tail and a bloody axe clenched in his hand. Smitty was about to throw the old tail out the door when his grumbling stomach reminded him of how hungry he was. So he took that tail, cleaned it, cooked it, and ate it. It didn't taste that bad. It kind of reminded him of chicken. With his stomach finally full, Smitty got back into his warm, cozy bed. Smitty had just drifted off into a deep sleep when he heard a strange sound awaking him. It sounded like something was trying to scratch its way into the cabin. The old man knew if he stayed real quiet, it would possibly go away. So he stayed as quiet as he could, but then he heard a strange, otherworldly voice hissing outside. "Tailypo, Tailypo, I want my Tailypo." Smitty thought he must be imagining things, but then he heard it again. "Tailypo, Tailypo, I want my Tailypo." Smitty jumped out of bed and flung open the door and called out his dogs. They came running, barking, and sniffing around, but they couldn't find anything at all. So Smitty put the dogs back outside and went back to bed. Sleep had just eased itself into Smitty's body when he heard the voice again. This time, the scratching sound sounded like it was coming at the window. However, it would really wanted to get in. But the scratching seemed to be coming from 2 sides of the wall at one time. Smitty called out, "Hey, hey, hey! Who's at my door? Get away from here, y'all!" Then he heard the strange voice again, only this time a little louder. "Tailypo, Tailypo, where is my Tailypo?" Old Smitty, who wasn't one to frighten easily, was getting a little shaky. This was really getting weird, so he eased to the window and called his dogs over. The 3 dogs bounded up to the porch and they sniffed around and barked, but they couldn't find anything at all. Smitty decided to stay for the rest of the night to protect himself, his dogs, and his little cabin. So he pulled a chair up next to the fireplace, grabbed a blanket from his bed, and settled in for the rest of the wind-chilled, wintry night. Sleep soon overtook him, and once again he dozed off. It was almost dawn when Smitty woke with a start. The sound of scratching seemed to reverberate from every area of the cabin. Smitty searched frantically for his axe, his rifle, or anything that could defend him, but he was so frightened he couldn't find anything. The scratching grew louder, louder and louder. Tailypo, Tailypo, give me back my Tailypo. Smitty yelled back, leave me alone! I ain't got your Tailypo! Then he called his dogs, but this time the dogs didn't come. He waited and waited, but still not one dog came running. Smitty had never been so scared in his life. He ran to his bed and jumped in. The scratching in the voice grew louder and louder. Tailypo, Tailypo, give me back my Tailypo. Smitty yelled back as loud as he could. I ain't got your Tailypo, so why don't you just leave me alone and go back to your business? I ain't hurt anyone or anything. Just leave me alone. The scratching seemed to be coming from inside the house now, and the voice was so loud it was deafening. Tailypo, Tailypo, you took my Tailypo. Now give it back! Give it back now! Smitty pulled his covers up over his head and tried to stay as quiet as he could, but the scratching sound was now in his room. Tailypo, Tailypo, you better give back my Tailypo. Smitty felt something scratching at the bottom of his bed and into his cover. Smitty eased the cover down to see what was steadily approaching him. Then he saw it. A short, stubby creature with pointy ears, fat feet with long claws, and blood-red shot eyes that glowed in the dark. Eyes that seemed to burn straight through Smitty. Before he could pull the covers over his head, the thing pounced on his chest and looked straight down at him and said, You got my Tailypo, and you better give it back now. Smitty yelled, I ate it! I ate your Tailypo! It's gone! And the thing started to scratch and claw and tear away at old Smitty, trying to get its Tailypo back. Smitty tried to fight back, but that thing was too strong, and the claws were too sharp. Smitty's screams echoed throughout the dark mountains, then stopped, leaving a chilly silence. After a month or two without hearing from Smitty, the folks who owned the store at the base of the mountain went to the cabin to make sure that everything was all right. When they got there, they found that the cabin had been torn to shreds, but no sign of Smitty or the dogs. They searched the woods and called for him, but they never found a thing. As the search party was heading back into the mountains, the winter wind began to blow, and a strange voice could be heard saying, Tailypo, Tailypo, now I've got my Tailypo.